Touchdown, buzzer beater, do it all now. All now, top corner talking home run. Touchdown, buzzer beater, do it all now. All now, top corner like ooh.
Alright, hello everybody. It is Monday, April 28th, 2025, and this is the Monday Report. I'm your host, H. James K., and today we are going to be talking about this weekend's NFL Draft. Yes, the draft has come and gone. 257 players have been drafted into the NFL, and we are going to talk about the best winners and losers of the draft. To start us off, let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman must have sold his soul to the devil, or there's a blood oath somewhere. There's some kind of voodoo magic because Jihad Campbell just happened to tumble down the first round and just land in his lap, and now the Eagles have yet another one of those classic field general, side-to-side, thumping kind of linebackers. He just fell into their hands. The rich get richer. It's disgusting, and I hate it. But other than Jihad Campbell, the Eagles found value in several rounds while also making advantageous trades when the moment was right. Safety Andrew Mukuba is going to be an underrated contributor for the Eagles. I really like that pick. And I like the amount of players they got, especially for the low value some of the trades took place. For a team as dominant as the Eagles already are, this kind of draft is the kind of draft that ensures that they're good for a long time and that Super Bowl window really keeps going forever. Next up, we got to talk about the New York Giants. They managed to draft Abdul Carter and Jackson Dart in the first round. Abdul Carter is a future star, much like Micah Parsons, but they didn't choke this time, and they actually drafted that all-star pass rusher that people talk about. Trading back into the first round to get Jackson Dart and securing their future QB was a smart move, in my opinion. I know there are those out there, especially a lot of Giants fans, who don't like the trade-up to get back in, but in a league where if you have a quarterback, you're good, and if you don't have a quarterback, you're going to get fired and lose your job, Brian Daboll had to have a quarterback. They just had to do it. No matter what it cost, they had to get somebody that they could stake their claim on and say, we're growing this guy, please give us another chance. Beyond Jackson Dart, I love the selection of Cam Skattebo. Cam Skattebo is maybe the most underrated running back in all of college football last year. The dude is tough as nails. He's got so much heart. He's a tough runner, but yet he can make plays in the passing game. He can throw the ball. His performance against Texas for Arizona State was a sight to behold, and I absolutely love that pick. Another one I really like from the Giants is Thomas Fidone II. Thomas Fidone is a tight end out of Nebraska. He was super underrated in the Big Ten. He was a really big playmaker for Nebraska. He was one of those guys who's like the lone bright spot on a team that's not very good. And Fidone is the kind of guy that they got him late in the draft, like 5th round or later. But if he works out, it's going to look like a masterstroke because he's one of those guys who can block. He's athletic. He can catch balls. He's not as like wow flashy as Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren were, but Fidone is a solid tight end, and I really love that pick for the Giants. All right, moving on, we got to talk about the Cleveland Browns. Boy, oh boy. Cleveland. They made arguably the best trade in the entire NFL draft when they traded back from the 2nd overall pick with the Jacksonville Jaguars, getting the Jags' 5th round pick along with a whole host of picks for next season. That allowed Jacksonville to get Travis Hunter, but for Cleveland, they got a whole bunch of picks next year, and they still got Mason Graham, the best defensive lineman in the entire draft, in my opinion. Mason Graham of the University of Michigan was an absolute dog. He was one of these space-eating, wreck-your-life kind of defensive tackles, and the fact that the Browns were able to trade back, get arguably the best defensive lineman in the draft, and yes, I think he's better than Abdul Carter, even though I rated Abdul Carter higher than him, but upon reflection, I like Graham more. They got Mason Graham, they got a whole bunch of picks for it, and they also took care of the quarterback position. They drafted Dylan Gabriel in the 4th round, then they drafted Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round. Now, Shedeur Sanders' fall from potential 3rd overall pick all the way to pick 144, where the Browns traded up and got him. People are going to talk about that for ever. That's the most legendary drop we've ever seen in a draft, and it was crazy. I felt so bad for the guy by the end of it. But the Browns took a flyer on Shedeur Sanders, who is going to be kind of a lottery ticket because Dillon Gabriel is going to be a serviceable backup. That is the absolute peak of his talent because he's just not that good enough. But Shedeur Sanders was the most accurate quarterback in college football in 24. And there's one thing they always say, if you weren't accurate in college football, you're not going to be more accurate in the NFL. If you didn't, it's like that scene in 6 Days, 7 Nights. I got news for you, sweetheart. If you didn't bring it here, you ain't going to find it here. That's the NFL. If you didn't bring the accuracy with you, you're not going to find it in the NFL. So, Shedeur Sanders is very accurate. He makes really good decisions. He's tough as nails. If his personality works well and he really works well with the Cleveland Browns, that's going to be a brilliant pick in the 5th round. I mean, Tom Brady went in the 190s. So I don't think he's going to be like GOAT territory, but Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round is a no-brainer. Now, they did do something really curious when they drafted Quinshon Judkins, and they also drafted Dylan Sampson, a pair of running backs, a few picks apart, but the fact that they got 2 quarterbacks and 2 running backs has led some to really criticize the Browns draft, but I really like it because it identifies a need where the Browns need a quarterback and they need to be able to run the ball. And Nick Chubb is perpetually hurt, and he wasn't really the same coming off of his injury last year, so it's one of these things where getting a pair of hard-nosed running backs like Dylan Sampson and Quinshon Judkins, it identifies what kind of offense they really want, and pairing that with their okay receivers and the quarterback room that they have, it kind of helps them build toward 2026 because they have so many picks for 2026. So I really like this draft. A lot of people didn't, but I really, really did. All right, moving on. We got to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders landed Ashton Jeanty and a host of other offensive pieces to help solidify their offense for years to come. I love the 2 linemen that they drafted. While the selection of wide receiver Jack Betch was a much-needed selection, the 2 offensive linemen, a guard and a tackle, it's one of those things where they're not sexy picks and they don't really wow fans, but as a Lions fan, when you have a good offensive lineman, you can bully anybody. And Ashton Jeanty will not work if he doesn't have a good offensive line. I would know because Barry Sanders suffered through that fate for years and years. So the 2 offensive linemen I really like, and Jack Betch is super underrated out of TCU. He's fast, he's reasonably tall, he's got pretty dang good hands. He's one of these underrated kind of receivers that no one really talked about. No one talked about him like they talked about Malik Neighbors last year or those kind of guys. But Jack Betch is a good story. He's a really underrated player, and he's going to do great things in their offense, especially when you have a guy like Ashton Jeanty attracting a lot of attention from defenses. On the defensive side of the ball, they drafted 2 stout defensive tackles. They drafted Tonka Hemingway and J.J. Pagias. Those 2 picks are great because so many teams neglect the inside of their defensive line and get run all over, and when you're seeing teams like the Lions and the Eagles being able to just run down everyone's throat, it's the kind of pick where you have to have it. If you're not good in the middle of your line, you're not going to win anything. So I really like the picks the Raiders did. It solidifies a lot of needs, but it got a lot of value. It wasn't like they were reaching for guys who were way out of position. They took the guys who fell to them. They got really good players and tons of value. The last of our winners we got to talk about are the Green Bay Packers. So the Green Bay mother-loving Packers, as Tom Grossi would no doubt call them, they drafted Matthew Golden in the 1st round. It was the first time they've drafted a receiver in the 1st round since 2002. 23 flippin' years. That was so great for the fans. I know that Green Bay fans have been begging for a receiver in the 1st round for a long time, and Matthew Golden was a great receiver. He's really fast. He's got good hands, solid route running. I really like that pick. They needed a playmaker, and they ended up drafting a second one as well later in the pick, which I don't know how I feel about that one personally, but this was a kind of draft which recognizes that their offense was inconsistent last year and it needs to be better if they want to finish better than third in the NFC North. And with two teams like the Vikings and the Lions standing in their way and the Bears kind of coming up behind them, this was the kind of draft where the Green Bay Packers need to get better. And I think they really, really did get better on offense because they got a quarterback, they've got pretty dang good running backs, they've got an O-line, but they just needed a wide receiver room that kind of scares you, and they didn't have that last year. So I really like these two picks from Green Bay, the wide receivers, and that's why I put them in my winners column. All right, moving on to the losers. Well, my Detroit Lions are losers. They reached and they drafted Tyleik Williams, a defensive tackle out of Ohio State. He didn't have a first-round grade. He was inconsistent in the pass rush. Now, admittedly, he was one of the better run defenders in the draft, and that was partly why they drafted him. But there were so many other players like Nick Scornton and Mike Green who were still on the board that the fact that they drafted Tyleik Williams, if it works out, Brad Holmes is a genius, but I just can't help but feel like there was value left on the board with that pick, and we'll have to see. I love the pick of Tate Ratledge, the guard out of Georgia. I hated it at first because, once again, there were a ton of edges left in the draft, and I wanted an edge really bad. But as I did more research on Ratledge, I really like the value of this pick. He started a lot of games for Georgia, and he's pretty dang good in the running back. In the running game, he needs to work on his pass blocking consistency, but that was a trade that was a bright spot. Now, Isaac TeSlaa, that pick, I don't like. I like Isaac TeSlaa. He went to Hillsdale College before transferring to Arkansas. He's a local boy. He's a huge Lions fan growing up. He actually wore a Lions jersey that he'd owned since the 8th grade to his interview with the Lions. The problem with him is they gave up 2 2026 third-round picks to move up and get him. And there's no way a guy like Isaac TeSlaa was worth that kind of draft capital. A third-round pick that cost you basically 3 third-round picks. I didn't like it at all. And it's one of these things where, yes, he has an insane RAS score and his measurables are off the charts, but there was value to be had in the third round that I don't get this pick. We don't need wide receiver depth more than we need trenches, defensive line, maybe some linebacker help. I don't like it. And I'm hoping that the loss of these 2 2026 third-round picks isn't going to hurt the Lions long-term, even though it might. It's very much a wait-and-see kind of draft, but they're losers in my book because there was value to be had, and they just chose the guys that they liked instead. All right, next we got to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay needed defensive line help. Everyone knew it. Their defensive line was not great in 2024, and instead they drafted Emeka Egbuka. Now, I like Emeka Egbuka. He's a good character guy, slot receiver out of Ohio State. He's got great hands, good route running, speed. He's everything you want. He can even run block a little bit, but they critically needed defensive line help. And I don't understand what their thinking was, because later on in the draft, they also drafted the critically undersized wide receiver Tez Johnson, the lightest guy to ever go to the Combine. He was 154 pounds at the Combine. His lack of size, being only like 5'9", 5'10", he's going to get pushed around in the league. And they drafted these two receivers, even though they've got Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. It made no sense to waste 2 draft picks on receivers. Now, they did draft a pair of defensive linemen, but edge David Walker is undersized for his position, and edge Elijah Roberts lacks explosion at the point of attack. It just seemed like a wasted opportunity for the Buccaneers to really solidify a line that is huge to their defensive scheme, but ultimately let them down in a big way last year. I don't know. I just don't get it. Some teams, I guess, get enamored with a player and they decide, screw filling holes in the roster that are a mile wide. We have to do this instead. All right, moving on. Next, we got the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers chose Tet McMillan instead of a critically needed defensive player in the first round. Now, Tet McMillan was arguably the second best receiver in the draft, and he's tall, he's fast, he's got a great vertical, good hands. He's everything you want in a receiver. Good 50-50 ball artist. But the Panthers had the worst defense in the league in basically every statistical category. They were awful last year. And they chose Tet McMillan over the best defensive players in the entire draft. Made no sense to me. They did grab a pair of defensive linemen in the second and third rounds, those being Nick Scornton and Princely Umanmielen. But the players available in the first round might have provided more value to their miserable defense than those two ultimately did. Personally, I would have drafted defense in first, second, and third round if I was the Panthers. So I don't like it. And then the selection of Lathan Ransom was another one that really confused me. Lathan Ransom played safety for Ohio State, and he was a bit of a defensive liability. Because in 2022, Cornelius Johnson put him on skates. Broke his dang ankles running around Lathan Ransom. It was embarrassing. And in 2023 and 2024, Lathan Ransom was a bit of a pass coverage liability for the Buckeyes. And yet the Carolina Panthers drafted him to be a safety in their horrible, horrible defense. I don't know. I just don't get it. It's the kind of pick that's like, what do you see in this player that you didn't see in a guy like Dan Jackson or so many other safeties that are better than him in the draft? Ultimately, more proof that the Panthers are the Panthers, and they're still one of the worst franchises in all of football. Moving on to my final loser, the Atlanta Falcons. Now, Atlanta had a critical need at pass rush, and did they solve that. They traded away a truckload of 2026 picks to first draft a defensive lineman with their pick, and then trade back up into the round to get a second defensive end. And yes, that does help their defensive line, but they only have 5 picks in the 2026 NFL draft. Now, for a team like the Chiefs or the Eagles or the Lions, that's okay because the roster's already good, but Atlanta is so bad. They're so bad. I just don't understand. And now that I'm looking at it, the entire NFC South is basically a loser. I didn't even put the Saints on this list, but every other team in their division is on the list in the losers category, which should tell you how miserable the NFC South is. But with the Falcons, they did address a need in an emphatic way, but they may have sold out their long-term future for short-term gain that may or may not even work out. And I don't know. I don't like that. I don't like that a lot in this situation, considering they were so close to winning their division and then they just totally collapsed because of the obvious flaws in their entire roster. And instead of selecting a lot of players to get a lot of pieces, they traded a lot of that value away to get a handful of guys who may or may not be up to the snuff. I don't know. I don't like it. All right, that's going to probably wrap it up for this episode. So I've also got another episode coming out today. Look out for a post-spring college football 2025 top 25 and bold predictions. I'm going to be recording that in a few minutes, and I'll have that out at 7:15 today. So look for that. For those of you listening on YouTube, thank you. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon, feed the algorithm to help us grow the channel. For those of you listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audacity, all those, thank you. We're hard to find. If you're listening, then that means you're paying attention. So, thank you. Help spread the word. All right, my name is H. James K. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time.